who just wakes up and says, hey, I'm going to start a business?
We had cash. We had money.
Give me some money.
My first question is why I'm doing work. Or
we have to stop this. We have to stop this podcast right here. $22 million. That's a lot of money.
Is what's called a liquidation.
Who cares if it's Uber for cats or Uber for dogs?
If I put $1 into the top, what's going to come out at the bottom?
No one knows.
Start small, and you continue to make your way there.
You actually have to be a chief executive officer.
I mean, I'm a pretty positive guy.
In crypto community, everyone knows you.
Frankly, I was interested in working for the FBI.
They pay more.
I feel very honored to be number one.
Look, I'm sorry to hear that. Welcome, everyone, to my podcast. My name is Sergey Gerasimovich. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Easy Blockchain. At this YouTube channel and this podcast, we're going to talk about business, crypto, Bitcoin, investments, and many more. I'm glad to have today in this studio a good friend of mine, Dave Perrill. Dave, welcome to the show.
Sergey, good to see you again. Been a while.
Absolutely, yes. It has been some time.
Congrats on the new channel.
Oh, thank you.
Excited
Thank you.
on the new podcast.
Yeah, you are the first guest here.
I feel very honored to be number one.
I appreciate that. Well, your smile basically is a big icebreaker for me.
Thank you, my friend.
So it's very easy for me to talk to you here. Well, so Dave, in crypto community, everyone knows you. You've been a very prominent figure in Bitcoin mining. You run a big company. I know you are a serial entrepreneur. Can you tell the audience about yourself a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So, well, obviously, I think you and I have known one another for about 7 or probably 8 years, I would think. So, since I've been in the crypto mining space. I'm Dave Perrill. I'm a 4-time founder. I've been a startup and infrastructure guy since the early days of my career. Started an internet provider in the mid-90s that ultimately pivoted into a managed security provider called SecureConnect. So I sold it to a Chicago-based company in your backyard called TrustWave that ultimately was acquired by Singapore Telecom in 2011. Thought it was out of infrastructure and data centers for good. So throughout that time, I think we built 3 data centers throughout the Twin Cities, was very much involved in kind of hosting, co-location. Again, dial-up was a big part of our business plan back then. And candidly, thought I'd be out of that space for good. So got into SaaS, did another exit, and then got really interested in Bitcoin and crypto in 2017 when I saw the advent of mining. And what I saw was a market that I was very familiar with, large-scale computers, large-scale projects, infrastructure at scale. But it was what was really different and really unique is that it was so focused around energy. Yeah. Energy, and when we were building data centers, was kind of an afterthought. It was like something you had. You didn't really care about the price. It was really all about the fiber and the connectivity and being able to get that at your locations. And so it was kind of a fun learning experience and something to dive into.
I know.
Long story short, bought a couple miners, used it to heat my garage. And that was the start of Compute North. So I got connected with my co-founder, a gentleman named by PJ Lee. He had 25, 30 years of both energy and project finance experience. I brought the technology experience. We combined forces, and that was the start of Compute North.
That's a very fascinating story. I think I met your co-founder in one of the events in Miami, I guess, right?
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, I think so.
You would attend those as well.
We talked about business, about a lot of different things, about raising capital. We're going to talk more about this today. So, started in mid-90s, right? That's early. That's when you started.
That'd have been the original company.
The original company.
This was high school, grade school.
Yeah, tell me about that. That's probably the most important company because no, really, right? Because like who just wakes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to start a business," right? I know a lot of people go to MBA, to schools and study business, but none of them really end up starting a company.
I wish I could say I was a mad genius. I had this great idea. So I loved computers. We lived in the country. I was very fortunate. My dad's a very technically savvy entrepreneur himself. So he started a company called One Corporation in the 80s that does digital signage, restaurant technology systems, et cetera. Mm-hmm. He brought home a computer for me and instantly I was hooked. So this would have been 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Again, living in the country, there was no girls to get me in trouble. There was, we had a hard time getting into
You have nothing to do. You have to start a company.
The fair was only 1 week during the summer, so that's when everyone would get into trouble. But my neighbor and my best friend, Nate Hubert, who was my vice president of operations at Compute North, so a lot of people know his name. He would help me out along the way. And so by my senior year in high school, we had 17 computers, like 300 phone lines, a full rack, and an overheating bedroom. So it was kind of a neat thing, and it was the business. But it wasn't really so much about having a company
Right.
as it was I loved the tech. I loved being around the space. I loved the learning, and that's really what kind of drove things.
That's so cool. I mean, you're talking about I love computers. Usually the people who love computers are the people who are quiet. They're like more introverts. You're an extrovert, a guy who likes talking to people, and the guy who likes computers. That's just a very weird thing.
I did win the Class Clown Award back in high school too. So just to be clear, that was a coveted award. But yeah, I mean the social side, the introvert extrovert, I do get my energy from learning and being more quiet. But I would say on the social side, I certainly enjoy people as well. So
no, that's fascinating. So starting in the 90s, then you went through whole 2000s, the dot-com boom. You were transitioning through that like craziness of 2000s. Like, tell me about like that period of time. What was cool about it, and how similar was it to the boom of crypto in 2017, 2018?
In hindsight, I mean, it was almost identical.
Really?
Living through the dot-com boom, I was, when it crashed, I was in my first year of grad school. So I did my undergrad at the University of Minnesota in Management Information Systems. I did my MBA in Finance.
Oh, so you did have MBA.
So I went on to do my MBA.
Okay, so you're one of those people who actually have an MBA and started the business, right?
Well, I already had my company. So the company was this was post it. Frankly, I was interested in working for the FBI and doing work. Or
we have to stop this. We have to stop this podcast right here.
This was right around 9/11, right? So this was right after the time. They were the government agencies were really lacking folks with technological experience and know-how, and it was a good fit. And I actually did get an internship with the Minneapolis office back in 2011. Long story, got stuck up in bureaucracy with the polygraph test. Like, you can't make.
You failed it, huh?
So I didn't fail it. I did. I got in like a nowhere land, and they couldn't retest me in time before you had to go to DC. Like, it taught me a lot about government bureaucracy and just the slowness and some of the problems with it. I would have gone mad. I mean, in hindsight, I think I could have done a lot of good for them, but at the same time, I think it would have been a challenging experience nonetheless.
That's a separate podcast we have to put together about all your journey of getting to
that went into the agency and have done well, but that's what kind of drove me into it. But yeah, I guess going back to your question of like the dot-com world, like everybody would ask you at the time, like, why are you going to school? What is going on? Why are you going to the education? The dot-com is a space to be. What was interesting is, we were kind of like the Compute North model. We were picks and shovels. We were doing infrastructure. We were doing hosting, co-location, data centers, dial-up. We were more of the pipes and the infrastructure needed to on-ramp to the internet. We weren't doing business models like pets.com or flues.com or these companies that really had no fundamental business models. So like, even when things peaked and crashed, we didn't see like a massive revenue shift or revenue change. We just kind of kept chugging along. But it's because our business model wasn't impacted the same way that others were. So it was really fascinating to watch, but I never remember being in crisis mode as kind of the world was melting down in 2001 and 2002. So, but we were certainly had a front row seat having an internet provider at that stage of the company, at that stage of the market. But obviously the parallels to crypto are certainly not lost on me. So I know we'll get there.
Yeah, we will. So the technology of 2000s and technology of 2017, how different were they? Technology in crypto, right? Are they equitable in value? Like, after 2000s dot-com boom, we got Google, we got Amazon, right? After 2017, 2018, we got Ethereum, we got Bitcoin. Do you think they have some similarities in value to the society?
I think every single nascent market goes through this exact same cycle. It's been extremely well documented. There's business cases up the wazoo that explain this, but absolutely yes. What did we get out of the dot-com? We got the massive fiber infrastructure that today is providing things like Netflix. Yeah. It would never worked, right? I mean, you could never stream I remember I'll date myself a little bit, but like the Real Player, like it was grainy. And I remember being able to watch like a 2 or 3 second like NBA highlight dunk was so awesome over the internet. You could barely see it. It was terrible resolution, terrible sound. It barely worked. It would take forever to buffer and actually come online. I mean, the fact that we can watch a 4K, with Dolby Digital audio video on demand in real time is absolutely mind-blowing.
I absolutely
you can even do
agree.
it from your phone. Like, I mean, just think about that kind of technology. And so that shift. Crypto is certainly taking, a similar trajectory in terms of, I think, where the value add, where things go. The thing I'll say about crypto that I think is still crazy, particularly like on the mining front, is how nascent we still are. We're just fundamentally starting to see things shift to enterprise-grade servers and software. And I think Block is going to be one of the first companies to actually come out with this, with their announcement with Core Scientific. Previous to that, if you look at like even the form factor and everything that's been built, primarily it's built for a home. It's built for a small miner to put anywhere. It's not built for large-scale enterprise deployments like we were doing at Compute North and like we see out in the field. It's a very different animal when you're dealing with tens of hundreds of thousands of units versus one. But we fundamentally need to overcome that because that's still the way that the design and the methodology, just because that's the way it's been done the last 10 years. And I think we'll see that shift soon.
And especially the form factor that you touched on. Like there have been so many different changes in crypto mining equipment, and yet we still do not have a standard. Like we have in data center industry, we have 4U, 2U, 5U, 6U standard, and you can just buy any type of equipment and put it online, right? In crypto mining, it's just insanity. Every year, you have a different shoebox, right?
About the fact that
plugs are different.
Yeah, just is the amperage.
Everything is different.
The different types of plugs that we continue to have to shift. And as like a hosting model, that presents a ton of difficulties trying to be all things to all people.
So is it a sign that we're still early on, that we do not have those standards?
To me, it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
So to your point, like just having like a U format, right? And having a standardized type of way to deploy these at scale. That's something that obviously the data center and the traditional IT industry has had for a long time. And then the tools and the software to go along with that, and we just haven't seen that maturation yet. It can happen within the crypto industry, but it will. I mean, there's a lot of momentum to get it there.
Mm-hmm. Look, I mean, this is amazing that we just start talking about Bitcoin, crypto mining, and we're getting actually into like biggest topic that I want to touch today. Compute North. I think it was the largest company that you ever built?
We were 1 and 2. So it was between us and Core Scientific.
But in your career in general, was largest?
In my career, in terms of size and scale. Yeah. Not exit for obvious reasons.
Sure.
But
and we'll talk about that too a little bit. Listen, so obviously you've been very successful early on. You guys started in 2017, right? Is that the year you guys started? 2017.
Founded October, I think, in 2017.
Yeah, you started growing the business, and then the business was growing. We were following that. I was looking, of course, like you were my competitor at that time, right?
Sure.
And I was like, all right, Compute North is doing a good job, and you guys in the Midwest as well. So obviously you were on the radar. And then we came to a point the growth was so big that you started to raise capital. And I want basically you to share with the audience, like, what is the journey to raise capital? Because you guys have raised over $450 million. It's an enormous amount of money, right? And people read the articles and they, that's $500 million. Those guys probably just getting rich overnight. But in reality, that's a huge responsibility. And that's not the money that just falls in your bank account on next day, right? Like, so what is it? Like, what is raising capital? What is the final product you get? And how do you get there?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things is always be wary also of headline numbers. So we talked about this earlier, right? Like numbers that you always see aren't always in actuality of what they are. And so just to give you like the reality of the money and the capital that we had access to. So in 2022, we closed an $85 million equity round.
Okay.
And so that's equity, right? So equity that you have on your balance sheet that you put for whatever purpose you see fit, and it's set forth. We also had a $300 million line.
Mm-hmm. Credit line, right?
I'll come back to this. $300 million credit line with a senior secured lender for debt. Mm-hmm. And so those were purposely built to go to projects that we're building and we're constructing in the field. And as we get through the story, you'll see some of how this all starts to come together. So the equity is really just to build the business. Debt is really put for hard assets. So things like containers, transformers, any kind of infrastructure, even land if you're putting that into the ground, et cetera. So when Compute North at our peak, I believe that line was only ever tapped to about $110 million. But
that's insane amount of money.
Still a large amount of money, but it's not 450. Right.
Well, who cares? Now it's like there's so many zeros there. No one cares like if it's 1, 2, 3 in front of those zeros, right?
We are in a massively capital intensive market.
Absolutely.
Like,
you have to buy the transformer, which costs a fortune, the substation. It's
and
a
you
hard
got to risk it, right?
Yeah.
If you remember also around the time around 21, 22, there was a lot, or even 2020, a ton of issues around supply chain.
Absolutely.
And getting actual access to the units was almost
everything was too expensive.
It was slow. You didn't know if you're going to get it. You had to deal with multiple suppliers. And so a big component of that was making sure that you had access to that supply chain when it was needed and when you were ready to go.
Right. So equity round, that means you go on the road and you tell the investors, hey, I have this company, it's valuable, give me some money. Can you, like, the audience who are going to listen to this podcast, they have no idea, well, most of them have no idea how to raise $100 million. Like, what is the path? Like, where do you start? Like, you start from presentation? What is it? Like, is it a pitch deck? I mean, it's $100 million bucks, it's like a lot of money.
Yeah, you don't get there overnight.
Right. Okay, so what's the way? I
think that's the key thing. So the one thing I always say to budding entrepreneurs that say they want to raise money, my first question is why?
Yeah.
Most of the time it's a completely bullshit reason.
Right.
And I say, and my response is don't. Right? Like bootstrap as long as you can. Like my previous businesses, I'll bootstrap them. Like even my internet provider, even though it eventually got to the point where we had to have, outside capital. I used an SBA loan. I mortgaged my house, but it was my own capital. I had no outside, anyone to answer to, because the second you start going down the outside capital round, you have external investors. You have other parties you gotta manage. You gotta work within, and it creates a lot of work and a lot of overhead and bureaucracy that you otherwise wouldn't have. And now public markets is even another level, right? But to for those that are in capital intensive industries, need capital, need to find a way to get there. Start small, and you should continue to make your way there. Yes, a pitch deck is certainly a necessity and a component, but I think what makes a pitch deck viable and make a pitch deck actually jump out is past success. That's why I hate just folks that, entrepreneurs, I shouldn't say I hate, but I always coach folks that have a business plan with no track record. How do you show a track record? How do you prove it? How do you show the model of what you're putting on paper is going to actually work in the real world? And that's by actually having results. And, if I put $1 into the top, what's going to come out at the bottom, right? I mean, that's how you really look at it from an investment standpoint. And then once you start to have that, you can start to scale it. What we were really able to do is showcase that the hosting model scaled. It was viable and it worked. But we started it with 1 megawatt in Big Spring, Texas.
I just can't believe that.
Right?
This is just
and then we built another site in South Dakota, which was, about 4 hours from Minneapolis. And then we had our largest scale project, which was Nebraska. And that was at 30 megawatts. And then we had another 70, and that was 100.
Right.
And then all of a sudden we had, 200-300 megawatts behemoths coming at us at the same time. And that was, those were, some of the biggest and still some of the most profitable
projects
in the country and in the world. So we're very proud of what we built and what we did. At the end, in hindsight, like anything, it's just, I think maybe it was too much, too fast. And there was too many things going on, and maybe we should have slowed down. But we also had such a massive market opportunity. We had customers that frankly needed what we could deliver and what we could provide, and we were the best out there to do so.
So let me piggyback on that. So would you do something different right now with raising that money after knowing what you know now, right? Like after having that experience. So you just mentioned a little bit. You said we would probably not grow that fast. Is there anything else? Like, did you consider the market risk? Because there's it's not only pandemic and supply chain issues that were causing problems in the market. Crypto itself was very inflated market in 2021, 2022, because there was a lot of money printing. A lot of people were just investing in crypto and Bitcoin. So it seemed like the Bitcoin going to be $1 million soon, right? So knowing those market risks, how would you do it differently?
Yeah, I mean, hindsight's hindsight's painful because it's always 2020, right?
Right,
You kind of
right.
look at those things. We had a large scale team. We were always looking at managing the risks and looking at what are the things that could potentially change and alter. Power prices was obviously number one. In 2022, we took out the largest hedge for the entire year in ERCOT. So we were de-risked from that, like the power standpoint, and we weren't directly exposed to Bitcoin prices because we weren't a self miner, right? So the bulk of our revenues came from hosting clients. Now, what you see in those kind of markets is you see some of the capitulation within the customer base, right? People that jump out, people that aren't necessarily willing to go.
I'm very much familiar with that.
So, you've seen that obviously firsthand. And so, I think obviously those are the things, but you can never really predict, but you need to be ready for. Anytime obviously you get over levered, it's debt is more risky than equity, unquestionably. So, but can you raise more equity in those kind of components? I don't know if we could have at that point in time. We certainly tried. It was still a very nascent business model.
Right.
Bitcoin, I would say, at least at the institutional investor level, is still a big challenge. And even in the public markets, it's hard to get much institutional backing. We see some of them getting the toes in, getting in some of the indexes, but it's certainly not mainstream yet because of the crypto moniker. So, we see that challenge. And so if you look at, what would you do different? Certainly would, had a different, risk profile from we'd have more equity, less debt. And I also say, I think, working with our partners to be more clear about some of these sensitivities changes, what could change in the market, how that could affect our business, but also why we would be okay either direction beforehand, before the crisis has hit. I think we could have done a better job communicating that.
Yeah, I agree. When you are like the first one and the biggest one early on, it's so hard to kind of penetrate the basically Wild West. No one knows. So I want to also talk a little bit about the team that you briefly mentioned, that you guys had a large team, right? Obviously, running a business of that scale, after raising capital, not even raising capital, you had a bunch of clients. I want to just make sure people understand that you were raising capital not just for some silly idea. You actually had a working business that was having revenue, there was profit, to my knowledge at least. And that's totally different than this Silicon Valley story, right? Where people come in and it's like they have this new application, they're gonna, I don't know, measure how you breathe, measure how you sneeze, measure how you do whatever, right? Here you actually had the business. So I think that's very important to understand that building a real business with real revenue is hard, because now you have to report to investors and to customers. Because going Silicon Valley model, you just raise...
But it proves it, right? Yeah, you never know your business. You can have a million models. You can have a million theories. Until you get out and sell and market and deliver,
Absolutely.
You just never know.
Customer is the person, the final purchaser of your service or product, right?
Yep.
And if you do not sell that, who cares if it's Uber for cats or Uber for dogs? Here, you actually have the customer. So anyway, talking about the team, you had a big team. Obviously, it requires a lot of courage and leadership to hire people, especially at that time when no one really had experience working in crypto, specifically Bitcoin mining. Like, how did you navigate those challenges? How did you guys hire teams, especially people around you, like executive level team?
Sure. Yeah, I think great question. I think a couple things there. To your point, it was hard to find direct experience, like where you could say, hey, who's been in the mining space for a certain number of years? So what you had to look at, what was the tangential experiences, qualifications, things that were related enough that would make sense. So think construction, solar development, and wind development were fantastic for us, right? People that knew renewables could do it, could parlay into it. Risk management, we were looking for folks that knew a lot about power markets, hedging, trading, the strategy behind that. On like the CFO roles, like understanding capital raise, but also understanding some of the economics of how do these other markets work, but not necessarily Bitcoin specifically, because we could teach that, right? And so those were the qualifications we would look for. I think on the how do you grow like a cohesive, really strong, really well executing team, it gets back to how do you hire to core values and how do you make sure you have essential things.
So values matter.
Values absolutely matter. But they only matter when you make them real. And as a CEO, the only way you make them real is when you hire to them You review and you continue to elaborate them throughout the process and the career. And then most importantly, I think where it really hits the road is if you terminate to it. Can you terminate your top salesperson because they don't fit one of your core values? For example, and I know a lot of CEOs won't. They won't do it. And at that point, all of a sudden your core values go a plaque on the wall that nobody's actually listening to and isn't necessarily real and part of your DNA. And I think that was really important. And obviously I had the experience of running the other organizations, the other businesses. We were top workplaces. We had a great culture and a great team. And I think we brought that to Compute North right out of the gate, where we really had people that were on the same page in terms of those core values. And I think that made it a lot of fun and made a very cohesive group that wanted to do big things together, and we did. So
that's amazing. I'm a CEO, I'm running a company. First, when I started early on, values didn't matter. What mattered was revenue, of course, customers, employees. But then over time, you actually learn that those few words about values, they do matter, to your point, because that's really what builds the company, what differentiates you from another competitor like yourself. Everyone can go and buy probably, a container, a transformer, or build an app, Uber for cats. But if they don't have an idea, the value, the rules that people in the team going to follow, as well as that core around which people will rally, then nothing matters, honestly. It's very hard to push it through without sometimes times are hard, right? And sometimes people want to jump the ship where they look, there's another company come up, they pay more. But a lot of times the same people, they actually stay because they say, I like this company. I like the culture. I like the values. And the values of that company don't matter for me. And I've heard that more and more times. We had situations in our company where people said, look, we love this company. We love the way things are. I just got an offer. I declined it. And I think that is the most valuable thing you can get from the employee when they say honestly to you and give you the feedback, the values matter.
Yeah, well, just to add to that, there's a lot of people talk about culture and have no idea how to build it. Right?
Yeah. So what is culture? What is culture?
Culture is your core values. It's your core values, is your DNA of your company. Right. And again, I think you can't just hire to it. You got to review, you got to reinforce
Absolutely,
it, you got to have awards to it,
with the company.
You got to grow it, but you also got to terminate to it. And that's where I really see a lot of CEOs not be able to make that call. Right. So we had 4 core values at Compute North. It was, integrity, positive attitude, commitment, and drive. Right. And so each one of those had a subset of how we would actually align that within our people, how we'd measure to it, and we would reinforce it at our staff meetings, we reinforce it in our quarterly reviews, and we would let people go if they didn't have the right amount of drive, right? If they didn't have a positive attitude. You'd have that Eeyore effect. If you're, you have that kind of negative energy, we would get that out of the organization. On the commitment side, if you weren't willing to do the things that everybody else was willing to do and really, do the hard work, you weren't going to be a fit at Compute North, and we would exit you. And so, and it just, we would, as long as that consistency was there from day one, it really created a, fantastic team, and not just at the executive level, throughout the ranks. And again, making those exit decisions are sometimes the only thing the CEO can do to really impact the organization's trajectory. And it's some of the hardest calls you got to make, and it's not fun, but it's also the most important.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I want to touch base a little bit, and we'll move to another topic about the CEO. I think it's very hard for the founder CEOs to become CEOs in the future when the company grows. Because when you're a founder, you love everyone around you. You love the product, right? And then when the company grows, you actually have to be a chief executive officer. You need to stop being a founder at some point. So was it the same with you? Did you stop being a founder at some point and start being a CEO?
It's a great question. I had the background experience of running other companies. So I came into it kind of knowing what was going to occur and where it was going to go. And so, my other organizations, were over 100 people. So I knew kind of what you hit break points within that company and that organization. So I never felt like I was overly attached. And I had to, like any CEO, I had to make some hard calls along the way. And those aren't always fun, right? They end friendships, they end relationships.
Oh, yeah.
They can be tormenting sometimes, but they're the best thing for the person. They're the best best thing for the organization. They're the right thing for the trajectory of everything. And again, that's why you get paid, to make those calls and move on.
Yeah, that's what I tell my team. That's why I make big bucks. Like,
right.
Well, so speaking of the tough choices and tough calls, I want to move on into the period of your career that is not probably the most fun, right? And a lot of people do not talk about it. It's not a lot of information about it in general, because when companies fail for whatever particular reason, there's so much scrutiny around it, and a lot of people are so closed up in themselves that they don't want to share the story. So going back to 2022, it's fall of 2022. I think it's September. Correct me if I'm wrong. Compute North files for bankruptcy. What was that day? Do you remember? Like, how did you make the decision?
It was my 10-year wedding anniversary. I remember it very well. So,
oh my God, this is the happiest day and probably one of the bad days.
I got pushed out of CEO, I think, on my birthday, and then our 10-year wedding anniversary, the company filed. So it was a rough month. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Not one of my better experiences, but I will say, Sergey, in hindsight, like going through the process, I learned more from that about people, about structures, about even just, the bankruptcy process, attorneys. You learn more about who your real friends are.
Oh yeah.
Going through that than you could through anything else. I mean, it's just it's amazing at what you see, and what comes to light going through something like that. So, and I mean, it's not just like boom, all of a sudden, hey, we're filing tomorrow, right? Like it was a distressing, long, hard summer, the entire summer. I remember the 4th of July being on the phone all day, dealing with, trying to spend some time with friends and family, not being able to because you're tied up with attorneys. It's a crazy, crazy process. I'm sure we'll break it down here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was tough. It was tough. It was my second time on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, as I always tell people. And I spoke to the Entrepreneurship Club at the University of Minnesota. So that was my alma mater about a year and a half ago. And those were the two photos I put, right? I put first time after we'd done our Series B round and the capital raise. And then I put, Compute North declares bankruptcy, and put it. I said, this is what an entrepreneur is like. It's
Absolutely.
the highest highs, lowest lows. And you mentioned this earlier. It's not a straight line. It is a lot of zigs, a lot of zags, ups and downs along the way. And I think the most important thing you got to have as an entrepreneur, you got to have grit and you got to have fortitude, and you got to be willing to go through those hard times. And I always, I felt in my heart of hearts, Compute North certainly could have made through the other side, but it wasn't meant to be.
Wow, that's so fascinating to hear the story about speaking in front of the students, like how you got into Wall Street, right? Wall Street Journal. I can't imagine, what was going in their minds, right? Like, because like everyone reads the story. You were one of the top 100 entrepreneurs in Ernst & Young, right?
Yeah, so
you got an
same
award.
year I was the EY Entrepreneur of the Year. I think we were
there.
Inc. 96.
Yeah, Inc. 96.
They were in the top 100 on the Inc. list.
I think you were the fastest growing company in Minnesota as well.
Good
right?
memory. Yes.
Yeah.
Were.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then from that, you go to another page in Wall Street Journal. So that's fascinating, and I'm glad that you're talking about this with a smile here, because I think that's a sign that entrepreneurship is just not always a great story.
So
it could be a bad story.
In 5 years, no one remembers about this. In 10 years, no one cares. Like it just
right. But that's why I want to talk about
the greater context of space and time. None of this stuff matters, right? And you got to have that view. You got to look at it as a learning experience, and how would you change things going forward? And life is very good for many other reasons, but yeah, that part of I don't necessarily want to go through it again, but I also want to go back and change it.
Right. So that's very good to hear that you want to go back and change it. So for those people who are listening and they heard about bankruptcy, but they don't really know what it is, like you had a big company and you mentioned that you went through like a very disastrous process of bankruptcy. So what is bankruptcy? What is that crazy word? Like, what is it? Is this a process, a system? What is that?
Yeah, I mean it's both. It's a process, and it's also a series of courts that run the process. And I think it's important to understand that. In U.S. corporate law, there's two key areas of bankruptcy. There's Chapter 7 and there's Chapter 11. Most people, I would say you're probably familiar with both. So Chapter 7 is what's called a liquidation. That's when things just sell, they go away, they're gone, right? And in essence, what's the court's job to do is get maximum value for creditors, people that the company owes money to. They want to get as much money as they can out of those assets because it's better as a liquidated asset than it is anymore as a going concern. Chapter 11 is the process for which companies that are facing financial distress receive basically government protection over a period of time to get things straightened out, to get back on their feet. You know, Delta Airlines went through this, right? I mean, you know, almost all the airlines went through this. A lot of large companies have gone through this. You know, in our industry, Core Scientific just got on the other side of, you know, the Chapter 11 process. And that is what Compute North did. Compute North was actually going through Chapter 11 with the idea and the need that they needed to restructure the debt component of the business with our senior secured lender. And so that was kind of the idea. So Chapter 11 should, you know, it can take, it's a long process. It's costly. You want to know the hourly rates of these attorneys. And
I'm sure.
I can get into that another day and my personal feelings on kind of the value creation and where this goes. But ultimately the idea is to go through that process, get everybody on the same page, get a plan, come out the other side stronger, better, faster, kind of like what Core did, and get back on your feet. And so that's the whole idea. That's the concept. And there's a series of courts that are built and constructed to do that. And I will say that's the one thing I was very impressed about the process, with both the knowledge, the know-how, the details of the judges, their ability to make decisions and be very business friendly relative to you know, you hear government a lot of times, you think, hey, they know nothing about this. These guys are very sharp, very in the know, and they get things need to move quick. Otherwise, value gets destroyed immensely fast, right? So that was the process that Compute North entered into on September 22nd.
Wow. That's just, I can't imagine how hard it is to go through this process. Specifically, you know, on your anniversary dates. That's just like so hard.
Most people don't know that. I guess they do now. We had a little date.
So was it a call or something that they, or was it like, oh, you already knew it's going to happen that day? You said it's a process, like a month-long process, but is it a month-long process to? No,
it's a several year-long process.
No, to file. Was it like you make a decision today and say, hey, we have to file it tomorrow? Like, it's not that, right? It's
yeah, I think so. The process really kicked off in earnest when our senior secured lender called the technical default on our loan.
Okay.
So for those of you not familiar with what a technical default is, it would be a default not based on payment. So some other covenant, some other kind of restriction within the loan. We disagreed with it. It is what it is. But we were served a notice saying, hey, we believe you're in default there alone.
Okay.
And that's at the point in time when our organization, and I think rightfully so, our board, our CFO, our GC said we need to have bankruptcy protection in case they push us down this road far enough where we're not in the right spot.
So it's more a strategic move, right?
Yeah, at that point, it's to make sure you have that option in case things do go down that route. So that's when we engaged counsel. We had our lawyers working on our side to ultimately work through that. And what they do in the background is basically prepare that. So if you do need to file, you have it ready to go. So being an entrepreneur, spending my own money, that kind of thing, you see these, hundreds of thousands up to millions of dollars of attorney's fees for something you don't think you should use or ever use. It's hard to watch, but you also kind of get the component and the idea and the why. And so that's when I want to say that started, that would have been July of 22. So.
Wow. So attorneys, you mentioned about attorneys. How do you navigate through those, for that hostile environment of attorneys? I'm sure there's when you file for bankruptcy, that's a big business in America. A lot of, law firms. Yeah, I can see you smiling. A lot of law firms looking at, oh, this is my chunk of a thing, right? So do you choose the law firm, or how do you choose them, or is it assigned by the court? Can you tell us?
So this is
more?
pre-filing, so that you're making all these decisions.
Okay.
So there's nobody that's forcing any of these decisions on you at this point in time. Is it big business? Absolutely, it is. The thing that, in again hindsight, I wish I would have been asking myself is, what's the incentives here, right? Who gets paid if what things happen? Bankruptcy attorneys get paid to deal with bankruptcies. Right. And so it's kind of like
job.
Yeah, it's kind of like the carpenter where everything's a nail, right? You just you're pounding everything, and you kind of see that.
I like the good comparison.
It's kind of the analogy. I mean, I'll just and this is all public filings, but Compute North spent what we paid our advisors, the investment bankers, all those kind of things, $22 million of fees. Ooh. So, and this was, through the process, post-process. I think that doesn't even include some of the monies that were spent prior to that in terms of some of our legal representation.
My God.
Which is just an ungodly, insane amount of money for what happened and what was sold. And so I can tell you a little bit more about, kind of what next steps were, kind of what we went through with Chapter 11. From what I know, again, I'm not an attorney, but I've obviously seen it close enough, and some things that I thought would happen differently that didn't.
Yeah, no, like $22 million. That's a lot of money.
Which also shows we were not insolvent,
fees.
Correct?
Right, because you could pay that.
So the
whole
idea was like, hey, you have no. We had cash, we had money. What we were running into challenges was the financing on our next project, which was one going to be in Texas as well, which is another 300 megawatt project. We had, we talked about supply chain. We had de-risked it. We had put money forth for the containers, for all the pad mount transformers, and for the substation. So all that was put forward. And then obviously we had technical default. We weren't sure the debt was now coming in. And so that was like a double whammy of where does the liquidity now come from? Yeah. You can imagine this all coming at the same time with power prices suddenly spiking because of the Ukraine war.
Yes.
And the push on the natural gas prices. Yep. So that happened as well prior to a hedge. And so it was certainly a bad, conglomeration of events, but not to make excuses. At the end of the day, it was our business. We were making these decisions. We were making these calls, and it didn't work out.
Well, it's unbelievable that you guys had to go through this process, and I guess you're still in this process, right? It's still happening?
Still in the process. So, yeah, I mean, I guess just to kind of, dot the I, cross the T on this a little bit. So Compute North went into Chapter 11 on the 22nd. I was removed as CEO September 1st. So certainly had disagreements on that, that call. I wanted to be there. I was, kind of the front page and fighting. So literally I was like kind of watching it from the outside in. Still a director, was on the board, but certainly not in the day-to-day. We had an independent committee that was formed of what would be considered non-insiders. And the reason you form that is so that if the decision is made to go in or out, it doesn't benefit somebody that's making that call. And so they're ultimately the ones that make that recommendation, make that they don't make the final decision, the board does, but they get involved with that to make sure that there's no personal identity and, liability with those kind of situations. So it went into that, and that's when, from my standpoint at least, things just got out of control pretty quickly. Assets were sold very quickly, very low dollar value, including some of our largest projects. Kearney, Nebraska, which is 100 megawatts. Granbury, Texas was 300 megawatts. And
unbelievable scale.
And then also like the management agreements were taken away as well. So we weren't, not only did we not own them anymore, we didn't manage them. So all of a sudden that revenue source was gone away.
Right.
Our joint venture project we had done with Nextera, that was also sent out the door for pennies on the dollar. And all of a sudden there was no business. There was some cash. Where'd the cash go? I went to the advisors, and all of a sudden, pretty quickly, within about 60 days, it was pretty clear there was no business. And that was tough. And so, it was represented, hey, Chapter 11, restructure, going to get to the other side of this and be a, stronger entity. I thought there'd still be a Compute North. And so all of a sudden, within, a couple months, it was pretty clear to me, who was getting the cash and who wasn't. So an equity was going to get wiped out. That was pretty clear to me.
Look, I'm sorry to hear that. We definitely paid attention to the process, as I mentioned, with all the company, and it was a big blow to the industry. It was the largest bankruptcy in crypto mining space before Core Scientific. And I mean, I know some competitors were rooting and saying, well, now we're going to have more market. But at the end of the day, it just left a crack in the industry, a huge one, right? It's like that Wall Street Journal. I read that article. That Wall Street Journal article basically showed the markets like, hey, don't touch crypto mining, crypto hosting. And it was so unfortunate. But I'm glad you coming through this. But I have a question here. So all of this sucks. Obviously, right? So did it leave an emotional toll on you, on your mind? I mean, it's hard to go all through all of this, right?
Yeah. I'm a pretty positive guy.
Yeah, I can see that.
I have a lot of, I'm very fortunate in many areas. I've had my other businesses. I still have my other businesses that I continue to operate. I got a great family. I got 3 young kids. And so like anything, you got to take these things and kind of, maybe put it as a bit of a blessing in disguise, right? I mean, I was traveling 200 plus days a year. I was on the road all the time.
I know the feeling.
The hours were absolutely insane. And it was fun. But I don't know if I would have wanted to do that for another 5-10 years. And I think it would have taken us that time to get to IPO, to get to where we wanted to go. I left, with my head held high in terms of what we built, how we got there, and frankly, where the bulk of our customers were able to leapfrog and continue to move on to. We always did the right thing for them. And they continue to be close friends, confidants, the team at Marathon, US Bitcoin, now HUD 8, like all those guys, Crusoe, like they've all continued to do really well. And I think a lot of that was, on some of the things that we were able to build and construct and, hand over to them. And so even towards the end, we were always trying to do the right things for them, get their machines online, whatever we could. And I think that showed. So the other thing I would say is that, it's given me a chance to step back a little bit from the operator day-to-day role. Mm-hmm. I had a couple opportunities, to get back into things, to like jump back in. And I just said, no, I need some time, just kind of refresh, kind of get there. Done a lot of investing, which has been fun. I'm on a couple boards. I'm still on the board of Hive, so I'm publicly traded, Bitcoin miner. And so, Frank Holmes and the team, and they've been great and been able to give some advice and some feedback and help them out through some things. I'm on the board of a company called Hestiia that's doing Bitcoin mining heaters out of France, which is really ingenious of their approach. And I just love the team and what they're doing. And Darrell was another company out of California that's doing overbuilt solar panels and roof homes with mining to really help optimize both grid prices and cost prices for customers, but also bring mining into a component of it. It's a really cool entrepreneur, done some debt funding for them. And so that's been enjoyable. I did start a new endeavor called, Backbone Digital that's focused on vertical integration. So owning power assets in addition. But as I told people, I'm just in no hurry to get into a bad deal. Like I am, I'm good. I'm fine. I have a ton of friends, even at, the conference we're at here this week in Nashville, seeing a lot of good people. And like I said, I have my integrity. I have my, what we built, and I got a lot of good people that back me. And again, you also see the folks that, weren't your friends, right? That turn your back or whatever they need to do. And like, I had some of those too. Like I said, I had a real close friend that literally found out was, stealing dollars or stealing equity from us from our clients underneath the table. Like, those are the kind of things that, unfortunately are somewhat common in this industry and happen. But again, those are the people you don't want in your life anyhow. So you move on.
That's a very inspiring story. So it sounds like you've been busy. How did your family react to what happened? Did they? Obviously they've supported you, your wife, your kids, your family man, as you just said. So how are they looking into you going back into entrepreneurship? Like they say, oh no, like stop, or they're supporting you?
They're very supportive.
Oh really?
So that's great to hear. I don't think my wife wants me on the road quite as much as I was there for a period. I don't know if I want to get back there. But I still enjoy, the travel, the meeting the people. I always, tell people, even my executives in my other businesses, like deals, opportunities don't happen behind a desk. Like a lot of questions like, how did you build Compute North? I'm like, I got on a damn airplane. Like I'd go see things. I'd go talk to people. I'd go talk to people, go do what I need to do. I'd go vet things out, and I'd have those hard conversations, in person. COVID was frankly part of the hardest time that I ever had because we weren't able to get deals done. Because you would see these things freeze, both from customers and from, even like our energy partners and our development deals. They would really freeze up. And so it was, once, travel started rolling again and you were able to get back in an airplane, things really loosened up. But 2020 was kind of like, I just felt like we were kind of stuck in a box. But so, yeah, getting in, but also a lot more seasoned.
Right. More experienced.
And a lot of scar tissue along the way to understand
helps.
what to do and what not to do. Yeah.
So you have 3 kids, right?
3 little ones. Yep.
3. So do you teach them how to invest in crypto yet?
Not yet. I'm working on basic finances. So you have kids?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So you'll appreciate this. Like, in today's world, it's even trying to understand just basic money concepts.
Right.
Because everything's credit card or Apple Pay.
Yeah.
Or I actually took him to a bank 2 weeks ago.
No way.
We went
did.
there. We showed him where money comes
so
from.
You start from fiat, then you say that thing that I showed you was bad. Now I'm going to show you crypto.
Not quite there yet. They do have some books. You appreciate this. You know what they loved the most was the little vacuum tube that shoots to the drive-through.
Oh yeah.
But they got to put their stuffed animals and keep going through that the whole time.
So
that
cool.
was and the vault. Those were the 2 things that were the biggest highlight. But so yeah, it's getting them that kind of education, understanding crypto. I think that will come with time. But my oldest is 8, so they're touching base, but they're not there yet.
Well, the next generation, your kids, my future kids, they probably wouldn't really know the paper money anymore. All the money will be digital.
Agreed.
And we do not really know if it's going to be a digital money in a form of like government money, or will it be just literally crypto money? Peer-to-peer transactions is something that may happen, and we may not even wait long for that.
They probably won't drive a car.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Well, I'm glad your family is supporting. That's a big part. So I think for our audience, it's important to know that like sharing your passion with family and them supporting your passion is just like 100% great thing, and you're set up for a win. Because otherwise, if your wife or girlfriend or friend not supporting you, that's just very hard because you have to fight 2 dragons, right?
Oh my God.
You have to fight someone at home, someone in the market, someone in the boardroom.
I talked, with the Entrepreneurship Club, one of the other concepts I talked about was the 3 big decisions in life that you can't screw up, right?
Right.
And I said they're all changeable, they're all malleable, but you got to spend some time and think them through, because if they're wrong, you're going to be miserable. It's where you live, who you marry, and what you do, right?
Oh yeah, those are big ones.
Yes, and they matter. And I'm always just amazed that, I have a good friend from high school that complains about his job. I'm like, change it. Do something different.
Right.
Or the buddy who's just in a miserable marriage. I'm like, move on. Do something, just break up. Go your own way. You can change some of these things. But if you live with it, you're going to be unhappy. But no, I'm fortunate to have a very supportive, family, friends, I hate to use the word, but I'm blessed. I am. And I'm fortunate from that standpoint, but that's an important part of your life. And, when you go through kind of these things, you see the people that step up and see people that don't.
What was your dream job when you were a kid?
I want to be an FBI agent.
Oh my God. You actually did that, right?
Uh-huh. Well, I got the internship. I didn't get through it. But
right.
Yes. So we started the process.
What is your favorite book?
What's my favorite book?
Yeah.
I'll go with the business side is Traction, which is a system of running companies, how to take strategy to execution and actually cause a cadence in the business that drives results. And I think it is amazing the things they teach in that.
Really?
Again, they don't teach in grad school. They don't teach in business school. How to hire, how to run a meeting.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And how to drive culture.
What was your first dream purchase? What did you buy when you made money?
No idea. Nothing jumps out of like a big time purchase that I can think of. I'm pretty conservative with dollars.
I know.
I like experiences and spending time and going places and doing things that probably more. So,
do you have some hobbies? What do you do in free time?
So I'm still active playing softball. I travel a lot,
Nice.
Also with my wife and kids, and we enjoy time at the lake. Being from Minneapolis and Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes.
Right. Are you a
part of the
boater?
things you got to do. We have a boater. We have a pontoon.
Nice.
So it goes fast, which is
Oh, yeah.
good for the
That's
kids.
great.
They hang them on the pontoon, and if they're on their inflatables. So, but if they misbehave, then you go extra fast and hit some waves, and then it causes them to calm down and behave again. So,
what was the best gift you've ever received?
probably from my dad, my original IBM XT 8088 computer.
And that's what started everything.
That started everything. Yeah.
Dave, what an inspiring story, man. So if the audience wants to follow you, do you have any social media, website? Where would you want them to go?
I have no social media. I never have, other than LinkedIn is probably the one that I do. So
Great.
I still make Friendster jokes and MySpace jokes. That ages me a little bit, but no, I'm not on Twitter or
Lucky you are.
any of those.
Lucky you are.
I know. I feel I stay more moderate. And I stay more focused because it just, I don't know, I think the ADD kicks in when I start getting all the items.
Right.
But no, so if there's interest, I'm always looking at, projects, investment opportunities, mentorships, boards, those kind of things are very interesting to me. And so LinkedIn would be the best way to track me down. So Dave Perrill, Perrill.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dave Perrill. If you have some comments and ideas, share them in comment section.
Sergey, hey, thanks for having me. Subscribe to the channel. So it's good stuff. Look forward to following it as it continues to evolve.
Awesome. Dave, thank you very much for this
Thanks for having
conversation.
me on, my friend. So
it's been great.
Great seeing you.
Very inspiring story. Thank you.
All right.